Rain hits the tin roof like a drum, loud and quick, and Amina feels the cold of it through the thin dress she wears to sweep the compound. A silver locket swings from her neck, warm against her chest, a small round weight that keeps her steady. A car glides down the street and splashes water into the gutter. The spray smells of oil and wet dust. A man in a black coat steps out and offers an envelope, thick and heavy, like a promise made of paper. He says, low and smooth, that it is better to take what is clean than to fight mud with bare hands. Amina looks at the envelope, then at the locket, and the rain is a drumbeat that asks one simple question: what will she choose? She presses the locket with 2 fingers and slides the envelope back across the cracked step without a word. Inside a tower window down the lane, Kunle Adeyemi watches the bend of her wrist and the way her jaw tightens, and for the first time in years, he feels the heat of surprise. Kunle is a man made of glass and light in the public eye, a builder of islands out of concrete and neon, a man whose name sits on bridges and business schools. He stands in a room full of maps and digital screens, the city spread below like a chessboard. The camera crews call him a billionaire. The billboards call him a visionary. He is not used to being stopped. But he is stopped now by a thin woman in a soaked dress and a small silver memory against her skin. The envelope is a small bird of money that wants to land on her palm, offering forgetfulness. She will not take it. Kunle clocks the decision as if it were a strike of lightning. Something in him tightens and loosens at the same time. He opens the window despite the rain and breathes in wet air that smells like fish and petrol. Without thinking, he steps out into the street. He blends into the crowd like a strange shadow, shoes soft on the pavement, and follows Amy. Past hawker stalls, past a woman braiding hair under leaking tarpaulin, past boys trading mangoes for gossip. He watches her go into the lower house, a narrow stepped building where music and washing hang on the line. A little boy with a bandage on his knee runs to meet her, hair full of caked mud and a grin bright as a match. Amina scoops him up and smells of sweat and bread. Kunle feels a plan forming, not a business plan, but a human one, awkward and new. Steps into the doorway like a ghost and says, "I am Kunle," and the name collides with the hum of the house. Her eyes flick across him and do not find the man he expects to be. She sees only a stranger, and a stranger offers no help. The first obstacle is the public. Kunle chooses to put money where he sees need, quietly and without cameras. But the city is a loud place, and someone always notes coins in odd hands. He begins by sending small things: rice, Band-Aids, a butcher's meat for the children. When those packages arrive, someone spreads the rumor that it is a billionaire's PR show, that Amina is on a payroll, and that truth is easily found in glossy pamphlets. The second obstacle is the men in suits who come at night with papers and a bulldozer's song. They want the land the narrow houses sit on. They want the riverside stretch to build a wall of glass for Kunle's new project, the Blue Crescent. A man with a watch as wide as a dinner plate tells Amina to sign a paper that says her house is abandoned. He says the envelope is heavy enough to make her forget the children of the lane. Amina says no. The men smile like blades. The third obstacle is debt. Amina stitches small shirts at night for extra naira, her hands moving like birds, but the bills pile. Her sister calls from a distant village asking for school money, and the voice cracks into silence at the other end. A landlord threatens to raise the rent. Kunle sends money in an envelope meant to sit on a doorstep without claim. But the men with the bulldozer know the city better than Kunle's help. When an inspector arrives with a stamped paper that smells official, the house shivers. Amina wakes one morning to the sound of nails and a truck engine. The inspector says they have orders. She runs to the door and finds a notice nailed to the fence with bold letters and a date that is thinner than a promise. Her throat goes dry as the ground. Kunle moves more boldly then. He puts cameras on the fence, hires a lawyer with steady hands, and opens a public hearing to the press. He brings satellite maps, and he brings an old-school teacher named Mama Efe, who remembers the lane before the towers wanted it. The press smells of scandal and clicks tongues at every meeting. The men behind the demolition have friends in the council, and those friends have long arms. Amina watches Kunle speak and sees a bird she is not used to, a man whose voice can close a bank and whose smile can open a whole city. Yet even with his power, the opposition keeps moving like smoke. The lawyer says the law is a net that often misses the small fish. Evidence is lost. Witnesses forget to attend. Someone's ID disappears. Each problem feels like a new lock on an old gate. Amina's days are stitched together in small acts. She feeds the boys and the old woman with a cough who sits in the sun. She collects water in an old jerry can and hums a lullaby that once soothed a baby in another house. She takes the trash out and cleans the compound and mends a child's trouser with a needle so thin it disappears. In the evenings, she writes letters to no one, folding paper in her palms like prayers and sealing them for safekeeping inside the locket. The locket is more than jewelry. It is a photograph folded into metal, a picture of a woman who taught her to keep a flame even when the rain wants to put it out. Kunle watches these small rituals and begins to understand that his money cannot buy the shape of her courage. The midpoint twist curves the story like lightning in the sky. Kunle expects a grateful nod, a simple accept and leave. He expects Amina to take his help, sign a paper, and move to a small apartment with a fridge and free water. He brings that offer in a neat envelope, a polite plan with lines on a spreadsheet. Amina turns it down. Kunle bristles, confused and then hurt, and presses until she tells him why. The truth flips like a coin and shows another face. Amina was not born to be a quiet house cleaner who keeps to her place. She once ran a small school under a mango tree where she fed children porridge and taught them to count and recite. She once saved a baby that a midwife thought would not breathe, who reopened its mouth in her hands and took the first noisy breath. The locket holds a photograph of the class under the mango tree. The envelope the men offered was meant to erase the school, to clear the land, to make room for a wall of glass. Her no is not stubbornness. It is the memory of hundreds of small hands that learned to write their names beneath a tree. Kunle realizes the fight is not about one house, it is about the future of the whole lane. The twist makes Kunle angry in a new way. He thought he would rescue with money and never get his hands dirty. Now he understands the dirt under the nails. He begins to act like a man who carries soil on his shoes. He holds a meeting in the lane and invites the press. Cameras spill light over cracked plaster and over the children running between legs. He tells the story of the school under the mango tree. He speaks the city's language, numbers, permits, appeals, and he uses his name as a door to bring attention. The lane fills with people who begin to remember their own histories. A teacher who lost a job comes forward with a stack of old notebooks, the proof of lessons taught. A young man produces a photograph of the school painted bright. Crowd and cameras become a drum that keeps the rain away for an afternoon. The first victory tastes like tea and bread, but victory in this city is a brittle thing. The opposition strikes back with sharper tools. The men with suits spread a story that Amina is a criminal, that the school is an illegal shack, that Kunle is buying votes. They leak a clip of a private charity meeting where Kunle jokes about clean sweeps, and the headline screams. The fourth obstacle rises: reputation attacks. Old friends step away to protect their own names. Banks refuse to move money without legal clearance. The lawyer warns that a public fight will dig up older bargains, and the lane's mistake will become exposed in all its small human parts. Kunle's board sends him a terse email about distraction. The city council convenes in closed doors and decides nothing but to whisper. The men arrange for a night demolition under the cover of darkness. Amina sleeps with one eye half open. The crisis arrives on a dry, wind-swept morning when concrete dust promises to taste like the future. The bulldozer comes early and big, and the driver swings like a machine with metal teeth. The lane gathers like a flock, elders with canes, teens with phones, children smudged with flour and grief. Amina places her palm on the school door and feels it shudder. She prays in a language that is only small sounds and harder meaning. The men in suits call this progress. They call the children collateral. Kunle runs to the scene, voice raising like a horn, but even his voice is swallowed by the bulldozer. The machine hits the school wall, and then the ground opens in a violent cough. Bricks fall like teeth. The little boy with the bandage, the one who always smiles like a match, runs toward the doorway as if he can stop a wind. A man with a hard cap pushes him aside. He falls and hits the edge of a concrete slab. He dies before the ambulance breathes. The lane opens up in a sound like someone taking all the air out of the sky. The grief is a stone in Amina's hands. She kneels by the boy and presses her forehead to his small, still face. Her world narrows to the child's small ribs and the hot blood on the dust. Kunle collapses to his knees too, hands shaking like a reed. Cameras whirl and someone records, but their shots feel flat, like photographs of a fall. The city tries to explain itself with lawyers and excuses, but the lane knows the blunt truth. Someone traded a life for a plan. The loss is bright and terrible. Amina's choice unspools in her like thread. She can leave with Kunle's money now, take her nephew's body to a distant village and keep breathing in a small place where no one wants her school, or she can stay and make their mouths speak truth. The decision is a raw thing she chews on until it softens. She chooses to stay. The lane gathers like hands in a bowl and carries the boy to the small church at the corner, and the women sing a song that is thin as a ribbon, but strong as iron. Kunle offers his private jet to take the boy to a better hospital, offers every sum he has to move the court case quickly, but Amina says no to the private removal. She asks for truth. Her hard choice is not to rescue herself. It is to turn the pain into a voice that will be heard in rooms built to forget. The lane arranges a funeral under the mango tree with a crowd that spans faces and trades. They sit with mud on their knees, and the city watches because a billion tree can be shaken when a child is cut down. The press photographs the sorrow and publishes it, and for once, the city's moneyed people feel the smallness of their power. The multi-climax begins when Kunle calls the entire press to the site on a bright morning when the dust is still tasting like coal. He says he has evidence, documents, bank transfers, and a recording from a driver's phone. He says he will release everything live. The antagonist, Councilman Nwosu, who has the city swallowed into his palms, appears in an expensive suit with a lighter smile. He stands behind microphones too, like a mirror with a hand in each coin. The unexpected witness arrives in the form of a young girl named Zuri, who hawks roasted corn and has a phone that never leaves her hand. Zuri shows a shaky video she took on the morning of the demolition. A man in a yellow vest slipping a small envelope to a man in a cap with Nwosu's ring. The video trembles, and the crowd leans in. Kunle plays the file at full volume, and the audio carries over the street like a bell. Men in the back freeze. The video catches a face, a ring, the nod. The public leans and then stands. Kunle does not stop there. He walks the crowd through a trail of paper, invoices with foreign bank transfers, a photograph of a night meeting in a private club where Nwosu and a contractor named Ibrahim toasted a half-completed skyline. Then a cleaner, Mariam, who earns her living polishing glass in Kunle's towers, steps forward. She holds a paper that is coffee-stained and trembles. She says she was told to take a bag and leave it near the council office. Inside the bag she found fashion magazines, scraps of official papers, and a list with names. Kunle tosses the list onto the table where everyone can see. The list is like a spiderweb that ties Nwosu's hand to a contractor, to a middleman, to a bank account. Someone in the crowd shouts for the police, and the police, for once, listen. The spectacle turns into a public trial, lived in a single day. Cameras swoop, windows fog, and the live comments flood like rain. Nwosu's face drains of color as more stories connect to his name. The city hums. The mayor calls for a temporary halt to all demolitions. The National Anti-Corruption Bureau opens an inquiry. The contractor loses a prestigious license. Men who once thought themselves untouchable are photographed in handcuffs while their watches tick their heavy seconds. Kunle stands outside the court and watches the press feed as the city phases into a new light. The lane breathes. The cleaning woman returns to her work, and Mariam is given a small reward and a permanent job. Zuri, the corn seller, receives a scholarship for school, and the young witness lifts the boy's memory like a lantern. The antagonists, once armored by money and silence, find their arms turned by the force of a camera and a child's recorded video. Power slips like water over stone. But the triumph is not a clean one. In the middle of the public victory, someone leaks a private audio of Kunle speaking harshly of collateral damage to his inner circle. Twitter burns with the leak. Cartoons show Kunle as a man who only chooses when it suits him. The board members who dislike the distraction finally make a formal complaint and threaten his projects. He spends less time with the lane as he is drawn into meetings and legal tangles and questionable alliances of his own. He winds up at a desk with his face illuminated by a monitor and letters that smell of defeat. Yet, somewhere in the list of what is broken, the lane begins to rebuild. Funds are awarded from emergency city budgets, the school under the mango tree is given legal recognition, and the people start to chip away at a foundation that once belonged to a man in a long-sleeved shirt. 6 months pass like a slow tripod of light. The lane looks different now. The houses are patched in bright paints. Children play with a new donated ball, and the river smells less like petrol and more like fish and green things. A new building of modest size rises where the school once stood, but this time it is a community building with a tin roof and a veranda where Mama Efe draws letters in chalk. The silver locket sits in the small courtyard on a clean cloth, polished and protected. Kunle comes sometimes, not with cameras, but with a small bag of seeds and a face that is less glass and more a mask he trusts. He sits and listens to the stories of the lane, the slow gossip of who got married and who planted what. He laughs quietly to himself when a child calls him Uncle Kunle and a woman corrects them, "No, he is our friend who brought rain." Amina teaches again in a room that hums with small teeth clicking of counting beads. She sews and bargainers offer her fabrics, and the work moves from mending to beginning. Now, the silver locket becomes a symbol in their hands. Amina opens it one sunlit morning and shows the small photograph to a class. She tells the children how sometimes things that look small are actually the size of the world. Someone in the city, Kunle, has his name on a new civic library, but the lane names a bench after the boy who died, and the inscription is plain, "For those who love first." Kunle works with the city to set up a micro-grant scheme for women who want to start small businesses. He attends the opening of the community center and stands on the same cracked earth where, months before, he had stood with thunder in his chest. He watches the children line up for soup and thinks the noise of the ladles is better than any applause. Unexpectedly, the miracle comes in a small way. A bank that once refused to touch the lane now opens a local branch and offers loans with low interest to women starting projects. Kunle uses some of his influence to persuade a council to pass a law protecting small community schools from demolition without a long-term council vote. Nwosu is tried and stripped of his seat and fined, not only for the demolition, but for taking public funds. The contractors are banned from city contracts for a time. the antennae of the city tune to a new static where citizens can broadcast greed and corruption. When Kunle walks the lane now, he sees something change in the eyes of other powerful men, a worry that someone might be recording, filming, telling the truth. The miracle is not a golden check, but a shift. The city learns the cost of silence. Amina's life is quieter, worn softer by the small, steady acts that feed more than hunger. She starts a small program to train other women in midwifery and sewing and in how to teach a child to read. She names the program after the little boy with the bandage, a name like a bell. Kunle attends the first class and sits in the back and watches the women stitch as if they are sewing new days. The silver locket hangs on a nail in the center of the classroom like a small sun. It is a symbol and a warning and an invitation all at once. People come and go, and the lane hums in its small revolutions. Someone gets married. Someone opens a stall. A young man passes an exam. 6 months later, life is not perfect. City life rarely is. But a change has taken deep hold. The lane has its own voice now and a list of small victories, a stopped demolition, a new law, a community fund. Kunle still goes to meetings and sometimes his name sits in headlines, but his face has softer edges. He walks past the mango tree and stops to tie a child's shoe, and the child looks at him like he might be part of the furniture. Amina catches his eye and nods. The nod is a clean, quiet thing. They do not need to speak, because the work is the speech. Amina polishes the locket on a bright day and takes it to the window where the sun slices across the classroom. The photograph inside is a line of small faces and one smiling adult whose hands shape them into rowers. She pins the locket to a small board where parents hang promises, names, birthdays, hopes. Kunle watches through the open door with a cup of tea, steam lifting like a small ghost. He no longer offers envelopes in rain. He offers meetings and an attentive ear, and sometimes bread. He recognizes that what he thought he could buy was not what she needed. She did not need his money to breathe. She needed recognition and a louder stage for truth. 6 months after the trial, they plant a small garden near the community center. Kunle and Amina and many hands lower seedlings into the earth, and the rain comes soft and kind. The seedlings drink and promise shade. The locket hangs from a tree branch, silver glinting like a little sun. People pass and touch it, and tell their children the story of a woman who refused a bribe, and of a man who learned to watch and to listen. The lane becomes a living map of what a city might be if it remembers the small things. Moral: integrity is a small thing you wear close to the heart, and when it resists the temptation of quick money, it can change the whole city. Would you have refused the bribe? Yes or no? Please subscribe, share this tale with someone who needs hope, and leave a kind comment to lift this family's courage even higher. 2 weeks after the mango tree's memory harvest, dawn comes gently and rain clings to tin roofs like paper-thin mirrors, and Amina wakes to a quiet knock on the veranda where the locket rests. A plain envelope tucked under the handle of the door like a secret waiting to be opened. The note inside only 2 words: "Meet me by the mango's shadow at first light." She slips the note into her dress and slides the locket against her chest, listening to the city's soft hum, the generator in the next block, the Danfo horns in the distance, the muffled drumbeat of rain on metal. Then steps out into a quiet morning that feels almost holy, because the lane is listening again. And when she arrives at the clearing, the air already carries the scent of rain-washed earth and fresh paint on new walls. Mama Efe stands there in the faint blue glow of sunrise, a ledger bound in worn leather clutched to her chest, as if it were a child she could not bear to lose, and behind her Kunle appears not with the swagger of a man who owns a skyline, but with the careful posture of someone who has learned that power wears shoes that must be laced by others. The crowd edges closer, and Amina's breath catches as Mama Efe clears her throat and says, "I have kept score because history has a way of forgetting where the true wealth comes from," and then unfurls the ledger, its pages yellowed with years and damp with rain, and points to sections where every grant, every salary, every bench, and every book in the library has a name, a date, a village, a grandmother's sigh. She reveals, with a calm that makes the air feel thicker, that she has been the silent donor behind the lane's renewal, the anonymous funder who never needed the spotlight, the hidden billionaire who chose to wear anonymity like a coat that could shield a crowd from rain and still leave room for truth to breathe. The revelation hits Kunle first, his eyes widening as if the city itself suddenly widened its streets. Amina studies Mama Efe with a mix of wonder and caution, recognizing in the ledger's neat columns the same careful hands that once mended a child's shirt and stitched dignity into the ragged seams of poverty. And the crowd, mothers with ink-smudged fingers, teenagers with cracked phones, elders who have watched empires rise and fall, clasps their hands and hums a low rhythm of recognition like rain on zinc. Mama Efe speaks again, slower this time, and the words come out as if she's teaching a class she thought she'd left behind. This city's wealth is not a single face on a billboard. It is a chorus of small acts, sewing, tutoring, feeding, listening. And I chose to let the chorus sing rather than claim the solo. And she names a new governance plan, a council that includes Amina, Kunle, Zuri, Mariam, Mama Efe herself, and a dozen others from the lane, so that every project is co-led, every decision transparent, every loan small and repayable, every child's future a part of the ledger's living pages. The room tilts toward truth, and for a heartbeat Kunle's public pride dissolves into a quiet kinship with the lane's memory. When he finally speaks, it is not with a boast, but with a vow. If wealth can buy a skyline, let truth and care buy a classroom. And the crowd answers with a cheer that sounds like rain turning to river. Amina's voice follows, steadier than a drumbeat, saying, "If the mango tree could feed a village with shade and shade with knowledge, then our library will feed a generation with questions and courage." And as she speaks, the locket catches the light, and the tiny photograph inside seems to tilt toward the new sun of the room, a brightness that says the lane now owns its own future. The mid-paragraph turning point lands like a drumbeat in a quiet street, the revelation that Mama Efe has funded the lane not to dominate but to democratize wealth. She has been the quiet partner all along. And with that knowledge, the power balance shifts from a single name to shared guardianship, so that Kunle's wealth becomes a tool the community can direct, not a weapon he could wield. The city's gates open not to a widening river of capital alone, but to a widening circle of accountability, where every receipt is a promise, and every promise a step toward justice. The next move comes swiftly. A formal charter is drafted at dawn's edge, a concrete plan to protect small schools from arbitrary demolition, to enshrine the library and the micro-grants into a national template, to establish a fund that operates on the street-level trust that Mama Efe has nurtured for decades. The news cameras arrive, but this time they film not a bravado speech, but a circle of neighbors sharing bread, counting seed packets, and signing their names to a pledge that keeps the mango tree's memory alive in bricks, not just in memory. The antagonist's echoes fade as the lane's voice grows louder, yet the story refuses to pretend that the struggle is over. A quieter thread remains open, the lingering question of whether future leaders will keep this balance, whether money will always bend toward honesty, whether the city will remain a place where a woman who taught under a tree can be recognized as the true architect of its mercy. So the interval ends not with a final bow, but with a soft, shining horizon. In the weeks that follow, the library opens with a bell that rings like a small, brave alarm. The first workshops spill out into the veranda where Amina's students practice counting with beads, and the younger ones read aloud with bright eyes. Kunle's name appears on a modest civic library plaque that stands beside Mama Effe's ledger. And the lane's people discover that wealth can be a shared responsibility and that integrity, worn openly, can outshine even the gleam of glass towers. The locket, now hung on a nail by the classroom door, glints whenever a child's chalk marks line up a sentence they will later translate into a dream, and the ground beneath the mango tree holds a quiet, stubborn promise that is bigger than any envelope, bigger than any city plan. Justice, not wealth, is the true engine of change, and the last image is a long, bright line of children walking toward a future that glows with many hands.